Hey, welcome back to Mistake Man. Starting a new project, a new model build, and it's going to be a build of this Zentraedi Battlepod from Robotech or Macross. And I love Robotech. It's one of my all-time favorites, and um, fell in love with it as a kid. It was hard to find back in those days. I didn't have access to it, but a friend of a friend from school uh, had all of the Macross saga of Robotech on VHS tapes, so we'd go over to his house for sleepovers and we'd stay up all night watching episodes of Robotech, and absolutely loved it. So I saw this model on sale a little while ago and thought I would pick it up. And yeah, I decided I'm going to go ahead and give it a build. I like this design. It's very interesting, cool design, pretty iconic, and very alien looking. Essentially, it's from the Zentradi race, which are humanoids, but they're really tall. One of these really tall guys fits inside this little pod here, and they invade Earth. And anyway, the whole story sets off from there. But just a really cool design and a really interesting model kit. So I decided to give it a build. Anyway, I can take a look at some of the art on the side. What'll fit in shot anyway. Cool little design. Looks like it's got 4 sheets of parts. Pig guide on the back. Instructions are all in Japanese, but shouldn't be a problem. I mean, usually you can just kind of figure out from the pictures and by test fitting the parts how stuff's supposed to go together. But if there's anything on here that's, you know, that I can't figure out from context or whatever, then I've used, there's like a Google Translate app that you can do where you basically just kind of hold up your phone. It'll like live translate stuff and put the translation on screen for you. And it's a little iffy sometimes, but it at least can translate it well enough that I can figure out what they're trying to say. So yeah, I can kind of give you a demo of that. Give me a second here, pull it up. So it looks like this right here. Translate, that's the icon for it. If you ever need to find it yourself, you pick your language. To what language? So I've already got it set up from Japanese to English. I've done something like this before. If you switch over to camera, and you do have to watch out for like reflections and stuff. That's gonna affect things. Or if you're at a really oblique angle, it's gonna have a hard time with it. So you try to get it as straight on as you can, as clear as you can. I might have to turn this sideways so I can get a wider view because most of that text isn't fitting on the. There we go. Anyway, and if you wanted to pause it, I think you can hit the button like you're taking a picture, and then that just holds it. Oops. It's trying to do a search. Go away. Ugh. Hold on. Ah. Silly thing. Trying to read that, and then it's popping crap up in front. Making it difficult to read. Okay, I'm not trying to do a freaking search on this. Go away. Nope. Doesn't want to go away. Whatever. I can hold it out of the way. There we go. So yeah, I mean, that's a pretty decent translation for just like an instantaneous live sort of deal. All right, let's take a look at our parts here. So we've got them molded in this kind of a really light green color, which is interesting. And then this kind of a dark gray color. Okay, nothing on this bottom half of the box. Sometimes there is with these Bandai kits, they'll have stuff inside, or nothing on this one. So I'll set the box aside. Oh, and there's a little sheet of clear pieces. Okay, cool. And then these, most of the Bandai kits I've worked with in the past, if they've just been like the small, like Star Wars models, and they'll usually just have stickers in them. These actually look like water slide decals. Okay, very cool. So this thing's going to be pretty big. If you look at the head, this thing is mostly legs. Yeah, maybe just slightly smaller than what's shown on the box, or maybe just about that size. So, yeah, decent size. I like it. So I think what I want to do, since this is meant to be a really tall suit, I guess. I don't really want to call it a robot because there's actually a pilot inside. Um, Battlepod, since it's a really tall. I think I'm going to build some kind of display base that has something on it that gives you that sense of scale. And since the first time you see these is when the Zentraedi are invading Macross City, they attack Macross City, and these battle pods are running around the city, blowing up buildings and fighting the defense force. I could maybe just kind of do like a destroyed cityscape, nothing too big as far as like I'm not going to do like a whole diorama or anything, but something for the base stand, maybe some like building rubble and maybe like a car or something that'll like help give scale, like a destroyed car. I'm not sure what size of car I'll be able to find if I can just find something that's in the right scale. This says that it's 172 scale, so if I can maybe find something in that. It's like a Matchbox car. I don't know what scale those are in. I'll have to look that up and see what I can find. If not, maybe I can 3D print something. That's always an option. And that's kind of what I'm thinking going forward with this. So as far as color scheme goes, I kind of want to go with this is pretty much what it looks like in the cartoon. Um, that color scheme, kind of just like a light blue and pretty much a white. I'm kind of going back and forth on making it kind of realistic looking, with battle damage and like weathering and that kind of thing, versus, I don't know, maybe a more artistic approach where I make it really simple shades of just white and blue, almost like something out of the cartoon. I don't know if I could pull something like that off, if that would actually look good or not. Like taken straight out of the cartoon and place it on my desk, what it would look like. I don't know if I could actually do that, but that's an idea that's kicking around in my head anyway. This color scheme that they show on here is just a little bit too dark to me. Like the legs, I mean, it looks like, well, doesn't even look like the same color. Looks like they painted the legs more of a bluish gray. All right, I've got my parts washed and dried, and just looking at the instructions, kind of thinking about how this is going to go together and planning ahead for what my workflow is going to be. I think what I'm going to do is just kind of start pre-assembling some of this stuff without really using glue until I can get an idea of which little sub-assemblies would be okay to paint. And as I was looking through the instructions and translating some of the text, there are points of articulation on this model, and there are places where they tell you to glue things and places where they tell you not to glue things. In fact, that's what this up here means, where they've got the solid arrow. Anywhere they show solid arrows bringing something together, that's intended to be glued, and anything with the dashed arrow is something that is supposed to be not glued. So anyway, just something to think about. I've assembled a few of the components here, starting with one of the hips, one of the big toes, I guess, knee joint here. And that's interesting, though. What parts have movement, although not very much. Like this turns a little bit, but not much. Same with this one. But then this turns all the way. And then the hip has a little bit of movement as well, but only a tiny bit, just like that much. It's interesting. For a lot of this, I can probably go ahead and assemble most of the leg, if not all of the leg, and then do some painting after the fact, after it's assembled. But there are a few parts where these joints will become visible. So like this piece assembles like this. And then that's part of the leg. And it's got a little bit of movement. And so you can see a little bit of that strut will be exposed. And so I went ahead and painted it kind of a metallic color. Let's just use this Tester's flat steel. Just so the parts that are exposed, you see it a little bit, just looks like it's part of the structure. I did that as well on the little, there's a couple parts. You probably won't be able to see them. They're not too visible. So if you do happen to get a glimpse of those, it looks like it's part of the, like it's supposed to be that way. It's part of the structure. The fit on some of these parts is not as good as I was expecting. My experience with the with Bandai kits has been really good. Mostly just been through like the smaller scale Star Wars kits, and the quality on those is just top notch. And just assembly and fit of those models is great. So I was kind of expecting that with this, but it's not quite as good a quality. I mean, it's not bad. It's not bad quality at all, but some of the seams don't go together very well. Those are going to need a little bit of cleanup. This foot, or this toe, had no aligning pins. You can see on this one here, from the other leg, and you can see there's no alignment pins or anything to align those two. They just slide around. There is this little lighter colored plastic sole that goes on the bottom, but that doesn't fit that well either. It does fit, and it kind of sits down in. If you see, yeah, so here's the other one of those. And if you look on the other side, it's got like this little recessed area that section of the toe fits down into, but it doesn't really like fit that well, fit that securely, and it only kind of locks down part of it. So when I was gluing that on there and gluing these two halves together, I had to be really careful that these two ends were not like, they were lined up. They weren't like shifted to one side or the other. And you can tell it's still, there's a bit of a step there. Those little ridges don't line up. The ridges in the front really don't line up. And so, yeah, it just, and that's the best I could do. I kind of moved them around and shifted them to try to line them up as best I could. But if I lined those up, then it would be off up here quite a bit. And so, yeah, it just doesn't, so far the fit hasn't been that great. Anyway, so yeah, so I think all these seams are just gonna need extra work, which is kind of a bummer. But what do you do? The fact that I'm going to have to do work on these seams to clean them up, whether I need putty or just, some cutting and a lot of sanding, definitely factored into my decision to just go ahead and paint the model at least partially assembled, right? So I don't think there's anything about the leg that I've seen so far that would make it difficult to paint after it's been assembled. And so I think I'm going to go ahead and just assemble it, clean up the seams as much as I can, and then I'll paint that. I'll probably have to paint the legs separate, because once the legs go onto the rest of the body, there are going to be areas, back up inside and behind the hips on that little section in the middle that I won't be able to paint very well once it's assembled. So I'll have to do that separately. But so yeah, I'm just going to keep putting pieces together. Got one of the legs completely assembled, as you can see. And it's got a few movable parts, like this big toe, these little, I don't know, balance pads, side toes, I don't know what you'd call them, parts of the feet anyway. They have interesting degrees of movement here to let you kind of pose the thing. Real kind of an interesting, clever way they designed that mechanism inside there. I'll show you that when I do the other foot. But yeah, I think I'll pretty much be able to paint it just like that. I did mask off a few of the spots where I'd painted the metallic paint in there. So when I do paint it, I'll take these little side pad things off, just so everything gets painted adequately. These would block a bit of paint, and since they were not really supposed to be glued anyway, then it's conveniently detachable. The only other spots is up inside here. I'll probably have to, I don't want it to really block that, because I think that's going to be more visible than what's up in there. And so I think I'll just kind of maybe do something like that, and I'll paint it, and then up in here I'll just kind of do a little bit of touch up by hand. And then this little thruster here in the back, it's just on a little ball joint that got closed up in there. And again, you're not really supposed to glue that part when you put the two halves together. And so I'll just kind of put that in a position where it can kind of get hit with paint from all sides. So I don't think it'll be too bad just spraying it like this. Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and start the next leg. I didn't put there's two little clear pieces. There's these little clear domes that go, that one goes, I think that's the main eye, and then those two go on the foot right there. And so I'm not going to do that yet, of course, because those need to remain clear, although they're supposed to be red. I think what I'll probably do is just paint with some clear red over them, so they'll have just some nice, interesting refraction effects. I might, before I put those on, paint that in a lighter color, just so the red shows up more readily instead of against a gray background. Have it be against something brighter so they show up as red, a more vivid red. So anyway, so I'm going to leave those off for now. Do of course the prime and then the main painting of the leg colors before I put those on. But before I do that, I'm going to continue assembling. Going to do the other leg. I'll probably do as much of the major assembly as I can as sub-assemblies. So then I can just kind of do one session of priming and then do all those sub-assemblies at the same time. So anyway, that's what's up next. So I was able to clean up these seams pretty well by just sanding, putting a little bit of glue in there, and then once the glue had dried, just doing some sanding. And I say it cleaned up pretty good. So it wasn't too bad. I was worried that the seams were going to be a lot of work to clean up, but they weren't that bad at all. So I take back what I said about the seams not being very good quality. Okay, I wanted to show you what I'm doing with the foot here before I get it all closed up. So here's the two halves of the big toe, whatever you want to call that. And there are no alignment posts on this at all. It's just a smooth surface. And so, there's nothing to help you align these pieces when you're gluing them together. They do fit over this piece that has kind of just this raised lip around the edge that's supposed to fit kind of in that groove that goes around. And it does fit, but it really doesn't help you align it that much. I guess it kind of helps on one side, but I mean, even this is a little bit loose on there, and it tends to pop out really easily. And so it's really not that helpful as an alignment aid. And then I guess once it's in here, those pins fit into those sockets, and that would help align it, but I have to build this before I can put it in there and close that up, so that's really not helpful. So unfortunately, you just kind of have to do your best to line up those edges while it's being glued. On this other one, I ended up putting a few pieces of masking tape around in a few spots just to hold it in place while it glued so it didn't shift around. I wanted to show you how the pieces that hold on these little side toes, little foot pads, whatever, how they work, how that one works. And so it's these two pieces. They look very similar, but they're not identical. One of them has an innie, and one of them has an outie, right? So you can see that. And so that goes in there like that to form this piece. And then that piece fits down inside the lower leg. There's kind of some little half circle brackets down there, and same thing on the other side. And this fits in like this so that these two circles on the sides get supported by those, and then when you close it up on the other half, then it kind of sandwiches that in there and holds that bracket in place, or those two brackets hold the piece in place. And so they allow it to rotate this way, but then because these pieces are this is two separate pieces, that you're not supposed to glue. The instructions say you don't glue that, and the reason is so then you can have these can actually move independent of each other. So you can have your toes kind of move around any which direction like that. So really clever. I thought that was a really clever design. So yeah, so when this half goes together, this has been the trickiest one so far because I have to get this piece that for the side pads of the foot, that piece goes in, and then the big toe has to go in there. You know, once it's glued together, that's got to go in. The top, the knee joint has to go in there like that. And then there's a little thruster in the back. This little thruster in the back has to go in, and that one doesn't get glued either. It's just got a little ball joint on it. But then that ball has got to go in this little socket here. Anyway, so we got to lay the elbow, the toe, the ankle joint, and the little thruster and get all those laid down in place, and then put glue all the way around this and put that together without everything just falling apart, right? So it's a little tricky. Okay, so I've had quite a bit more progress on this since you last saw it. Finished the other leg, and it came together nicely. Didn't really have any issues with that. Cleaned up the seams for the most part. Again, we'll have to see if I need to do any putty on any of those seams, but won't know that until we get some primer on it. The next step was just getting these little cannons in play or put together, and they went together pretty nicely. The seams I think cleaned up pretty good, and they're positionable. You could either move them up and down, and they also spin like that through just kind of a interesting little mechanism with kind of like a T T-shaped piece that goes into a couple holes there that lets it rotate around that axis, and then that post that goes through and has another piece that glues on the back there, allows it to rotate. I'm leaving everything articulated now for the moment because I want to be able to pose it once I get it, put the base together and get it on the base, and I want to just kind of be able to make a pose with it. But I'm not going to leave it articulated the whole time. I'm going to glue it and lock it in place. But the fact that it's articulated is helpful in allowing me to choose a pose that I like for the model. Let's see, I've also got this couple little, I think they call them anti-aircraft cannons that go on the top back of the pod. And yeah, those are in place. And again, those are movable. And then I think this whole pod, once it gets inserted into the top half, kind of fits in like that, and it can also spin around like that. Next, I've got one of these little thruster pods that go on the side of the model. Most of the way done, I've got the little actual thruster nozzle on there, and that can slide up and down, move up and down on that. It's just kind of got a tab that went through that slot, and then a piece that block that glued on the back that holds it in place, allows it to move up and down. This is, I think, one of those things that I'm just going to go ahead and lock in right now because it's going to be easier to get to the inside. While I can still get to the inside and add some glue on the inside, I think I'll also add glue around the outside, but I want to add some glue on the inside as well, and I won't be able to do that once I've got it fully assembled. So in this, I don't really know, like I don't really have any specific pose I want to put these in. I think mostly what I want to do is just put it so in a position where you can't see the slot at the top or at the bottom, right? So I could just kind of position that at a midpoint where you can't see either of those, and glue it in place there. Not, other than that, I'm not picky about where that position is. On the back of the pod, there's this rectangular opening here, and there's this hatch that you assemble. It's got a couple of handles on it, and that goes over the back of the pod and covers that up. But then the hatch has, this is really strange, but the hatch has these extra pieces that go inside. So there's like this rectangular thing, this piece here that doesn't really seem to serve a purpose that I can tell. And then it's got a couple of little hinge pieces you glue in, and then this bracket so that it can rotate like this. And then this bracket goes into the slots on the inside here. So let me put this together so you can see what that's supposed to be like. And it's hard to do once it's fully assembled, so you'd have to do this before you assemble it together, before you put the two halves together anyway. And that holds it captive and allows it to slide in and match up. But I don't understand the purpose of that. Like, that's weird to me. Like, would you ever have a need to pull this out and rotate it up? I mean, if it had like a detailed interior, then that might make sense. Like, because if this is how the Zentraedi is supposed to get in and out of this thing, which is really questionable, how is he going to fit through that? But there's no detailed interior of this. It's just empty inside, so I don't understand. Like, what's the point of this? And then that piece there, like the rectangular piece that's on the inside. What's the point of that? Like, what even is that? It doesn't serve a function. I couldn't really tell what this was all for, but I went ahead and assembled it anyway, just because I thought, well, maybe once I get it all together and put it together, maybe it'll make sense why it's built this way. But no, I don't understand. Uh, yeah, like this doesn't seem to serve a functional purpose, so it makes me think it's there for like aesthetic reasons, like it's supposed to be a part of the hatch on this pod. But then again, like, why? There's no There's no interior. Maybe there's like an aftermarket kit or like a separate kit you can buy that has an assembled interior, or maybe there's a Zentraedi infantry dude action figure that you can fit inside of there. But I don't know. This is a mystery to me. It's bizarre. So yeah, I mean, if you're just going to be sealing this up like I am, then there's no need to build any of that stuff that's on there. Like, yeah, none of that needs to go there. This hatch is just going to glue onto the back of the pod and just be sealed up. So yeah, if you're going to be doing that like me, then I mean, there's no point in assembling all that. I did, like I said, because I was just kind of curious to see if maybe the purpose would become clear after I assembled it together. But nope, I'm still just as in the dark as I was when I first noticed all this. So weird little mystery. Not sure what the intent was there. And I still do have to do the eye. I kind of left that alone for a minute just because I didn't want to get that clear piece out just yet. I'm always worried about those getting scratched and scuffed if I just like leave them laying around. So I'm still trying to decide how I'm going to do those clear pieces. I'm going to paint them red, with clear red. And then I think I want to put something behind it that might kind of brighten that up a little bit. I'm not lighting this, but just to kind of reflect the natural light that's coming in from outside the model. Especially where this piece is going to be kind of shrouded behind this outer portion of the eye. This piece here, there's just kind of like it's open like an eyelid a little bit. So only a little bit of that red piece that is going to be visible. Only a little bit of light is going to get in there. And I want to be able to have some bounce back through so that you can actually tell that's red, because if it's just completely black behind there, if you've got a transparent red thing, you're not going to know it's transparent red unless you have some light pass through it to let you know that it's red, right? If it's just black behind it, then it just is going to look black. So I'm thinking about ways of doing that, whether it's just, I don't actually know what that mounts on. I guess it's just right there. So there's a hole. I'm not really sure what the hole is for because I don't think there's like any, no, there is a part. This is calling out piece 63 right there is like a little, I don't know, like a little bushing that goes in that hole before it closes up. Let's pull that up. It looks to be this guy right here. Yeah, that's piece 63 there. So it's like a little bushing, but there's no other piece that goes through that. It's just the shroud. And this is what the shroud looks like on the back. That's interesting. It's got those holes molded in. It's got little posts sticking out. So I'm guessing those, I'm guessing those line up here because they've got that same half circle shape. So that only goes on one way. That's good. That's good design. Because I think there is, this thing is not like symmetric. It's got, one side has these kind of little rib features. The other side does not. And I think it might just be the light that I'm under, but it almost looks like one side of the eyelid is open more than the other. Yeah. Does that look like that to you? I don't think that's just the lighting. I don't think that's just the shadows. I think it's actually like that. So that means, I'm guessing that the ribbed part goes on top. Yeah, that seems to match the picture on the side of the box. And the picture on here shows that ribbed feature on the top of the, it's almost like it's looking down, right? Which makes sense, because this thing is huge. really tall. So, okay, so that goes on a specific way, but, and then the clear dome that goes, it just fits in behind that. There's no like any posts or anything on that. It's just a simple half sphere, or partial sphere anyway. It's not exactly half, but yeah, there's like no post or anything that goes through that. So I don't know what the purpose of that piece 63 is for. Huh. This is a mysterious little model. Got some extra features that don't seem to make sense. Maybe that's like if you intend to light it, that's like a little piece that would hold an LED for you, maybe? I don't know. I haven't seen anything in the instructions that indicates anything about lighting. I don't know. Weird. Very weird. Almost looks lighted. Almost looks like it's glowing in that image. I don't know. Bizarre. Anyway, I'm not intending to light this, so the clear dome is just going to go over that light colored plastic. I don't think it would be necessary to paint that white. I think that would probably reflect as much light as if I'd painted it white. Although, I might have to cover that hole because that hole is going to lose a lot of that reflected light. That's a significant proportion of that area that's covered up by that. So I've primed the entire model, and as you can see, it didn't really affect the motion at any of the joints in any significant way, so that's not going to be an issue at all. So I've still got any range of movement I need to be able to pose this later. I also glued down a couple of these, kind of finalized what position I wanted these things to be in and glued them down, although this one kind of broke free a little bit, so I'm going to have to re-glue that. It's a little tough to get glue down in there after the fact because it's kind of a tight joint. I also glued these into the position that I wanted them to be in, and for that position I was able to close it up the gap on one side there, but on the other side there was that big opening was there with that big gap. So I just got some sheet styrene, cut it to size, put it in there, and glued it in place. And it's not like my intention wasn't to make that whole feature just disappear and look completely smooth like a sphere. I don't think I could even pull that off. So I just put the piece of styrene in there, and I'm just going to let that kind of rectangular feature just be there like it's supposed to be there. Just a little bit of detail on that. But I didn't like that gap, so I did decide to cover that up. And yeah, I think it looks fine. And I also did a little bit of experimentation on the eye, because I know I want to paint it red, and I'm not going to light it, but I just want some light to reflect back through there, so it doesn't just look like a dark red or almost black. So I experimented with a few things, and I thought of maybe doing white behind there to reflect the light, but then I also thought, I wonder what silver would look like. So I did take this is the clear dome, it used to be just the clear plastic, and painted the inside with silver, and then the outside with the clear Tamiya red. And I like the look. Just has kind of it's looking a little bit orange on camera, but in person it's very, very vivid red. And you can see just kind of the hint of that silver surface behind there, which gives it a little, I don't know, visual interest. And so, yeah, I like the way that turned out. Let's see what it looks like on here. I haven't actually held it up here yet. against the little eye fixture. So I was waiting for that clear finish to dry completely before I did that, so I didn't mar it. There we go. That's cool. That metallic surface just behind the red, I think it reflects the light nicely. Really makes it stand out. So cool. I like that. Had to take one of my gloves off because it's just the large dark surface area, the exposure was going crazy. Anyway, so yeah, with these little clear domes that went over the feet there, did the same thing. Just took painted the inside surface silver, and then the outside surface the clear red. Same effect there. Now, when it comes to the head, there's of course the eye that's going to go in front, and the main sensor. But then, if you look at the box art here, there's the main sensor. There's also additional sensors there, one on each side of the head, and then there's those, and then there's two on the above the rear hatch, and then there's two below the rear hatch. And I believe those are supposed to be, you can see the way they've painted them on this more cartoonish rendering of it. They've essentially rendered those just like the others, where I think the intention is that those are supposed to be sensors, to look behind the vehicle and above the vehicle. And I liked that idea. The kit itself only comes with clear parts for the main eye sensor and then these ones down on the feet. And for the ones that are above, there was just some like recessed circles, just kind of like molded in recessed circles. And then for the ones in the back, there's nothing. There was no feature there at all. In fact, I think those ones on the back are supposed to be stickers or decals. So there we've got those. And I guess I think those are intended to be the ones on the back of the head, and then for the ones on the top of the head, I guess you're just supposed to paint those. That's what it looks like on the box art, is that they've just painted those features on the top of the head. So I didn't really like that. I want to make those other sensors on the head look similar to the ones that have the clear domes, like the ones on the feet and then the main sensor. And so I had an idea to get some clear spheres and use those to kind of replicate the parts that they gave us the clear domes, and then cut out holes in the head. So right there where that circular feature, recessed feature was, I just drilled that out. So now there's a hole there. This hole is for the main cannon. That's where that goes. Essentially like that. But then that's for mounting on the thruster pods on the side. But this wasn't a hole at first. This was just that molded in recessed circle. So I drilled that out, and then for the back sensors, the two above the hatch and the two below the hatch, there was nothing there to indicate, no existing features. So I just had to mark and drill some holes for both of those. So there you can see there's the two below the hatch, and then the two above the hatch, and then the two above on the top of the pod. So my thought was to get some clear spheres that I could use to replicate these clear domes. And so I think it was a Sunday when I had this idea. So a lot of the stores I might go to look for beads and that sort of thing were closed. And so I just had to go to a couple stores that were open to see what they had. And so I didn't have a lot of options, but I did find like this collection of jewelry beads that I thought, there's some spheres in here that I might be able to paint. These ones have kind of like a pearly finish that I thought might be interesting with the red clear over them. And then there's this giant pink one. That one's probably a little too big, but I thought it was something I could look at anyway. Obviously, most of this stuff is irrelevant to what I'm trying to do, but it did have an assortment of spherical beads. And then I had these little kind of pinkish colored translucent beads. So I painted one of these pink ones up, and I think it's kind of made out of glass, so I'm not really confident in my ability to cut that in half with the tools that I have. So I thought, well, I'll just paint half of it red and half of it white. And so that's what I did here. And, it's not bad. Like, that's kind of a cool look. Just kind of that translucentness with just a hint of some kind of internal structure that you can barely see because of the hole that goes through the bead. And then getting some light scattering off the back, the white face in the back. And it's kind of a cool look. It's reminds me of like a salmon egg. But something like that could potentially work, but it does look pretty dark, so not a lot of light is actually making it into, through that hole in the first place, through that opening, back to that surface, and then making its way back out. So that's pretty dark. So I also found this package of push pins. That's a clear sphere with gold. Well, the gold pins are irrelevant, but it has these clear spheres. It has these clear spheres with a pin, and so I could use my small hobby saw to just cut off a portion of that sphere. And so that's what I did. And as you can see, I've cut a bunch of them. And they were just flat on the back. And I could have made that work. That was my initial plan, was just to leave it flat and then paint it silver. And then silver on the back and red on the front. But I was also curious what that would look like if I tried to mimic more of what's happening with these, where they're hollow spheres, right? And so you get that reflective metallic surface that's just behind the outer red surface. So you're going to get more light coming through. So I took my rotary tool here with it's kind of like a grinding sphere, and just started just grinding out the center of each of these little things. And I liked the way that it looked. It kind of gives it here's a couple of failed ones where I kind of got a little squirrely on the drilling out the internal sphere. It kind of, the bit tends to skip around sometimes and move where it wants to move, and so ended up with not a very good finish on that one. So there's a couple of these that are cast offs, I'm not going to use. But with these, they do give kind of an interesting look to it, where you can see that little sphere that's back behind there. It gives it kind of a fisheye sort of look to it, which I think is interesting. Could be interesting. Haven't actually seen what it looks like yet, but so I've got these. I started painting some of them with the silver, but like I said, I haven't actually seen what they look like with the silver on there. Let's see what that looks like. Ooh, that's cool. There's kind of a fisheye sort of look to it. I like that. Let's see what it looks like inside the pod. Yeah, that's cool. I like that. So yeah, I think with that coat of red, there's still a shadow on there, but I think that actually kind of makes it look even cooler, where you get the shadow on that back surface that's farther away, but the little bit of internal sphere that sticks forward, you get just more interesting shadow on that. I think that's going to look cool with the red. All right, yeah. I'm liking the direction this is going. I think it's going to look good. And you'll see on some of these, there's kind of some imperfections, like on the side, right there, where there's kind of a cloudy bit there. The only way I could hold on to these in order to use this tool, I didn't want to hold it in my hand doing this because, like I said, it tended to slip out. And while this is spinning really fast, I don't want to be grinding holes in my fingers. I had the same issue with cutting the spheres off of the original pin. Holding onto that while trying to saw was just, it was really difficult. So I actually have these hemostats that I keep on hand just for holding small things. Don't use them very often, but when you need them, they do come in handy. So essentially, I just grabbed onto the shank of that pin there, snapped the hemostat closed, and it doesn't hold it perfectly, but it holds it well enough that I could rest it against my cutting mat and then use the saw to, you know, cut a portion of the sphere off, and that worked really well. And then also, once I've cut that off, then I would take the hemostats and grab onto just the edge. It's really the only place I can grab onto this would just be to grab onto the edge there and then clamp it down. I'm not going to do it now because I don't need it, but so yeah, that does result in having that little marred feature off to the side. But I think for all of these holes, especially these ones in the back that are very small, those are not going to be an issue at all. These ones in the front, I think it's far enough off to the side that, yeah, that's it. That's it there. Right there on this edge here is where the mar is. But if I rotate that until it's centered, then that's hidden behind the opening, so that's not going to be an issue. I'm using X11 Chrome Silver and X27 Clear Red for those. I painted the backs of the little eye sensors with the Chrome Silver, and you can see here it just does really cool stuff with the light. Really, I think it really looks cool. The other red one that you see up there that was one of my scrap ones that I messed up and I've just been kind of using as a test. I painted it with red here just to see. So here's that one the test one, the scrap one that I painted red, and I've also painted the back of it white just because I was curious to see what that looked like compared to the ones that have the silver on the back, and that's just kind of what it looks like there. It just doesn't look as interesting to me as with the silver backing. It just doesn't look as vivid, not as interesting. So I definitely am glad I went with the silver instead of just painting them white in the back. But these, let's see if I can get this on camera. You can kind of see in the little reflection of my overhead light there, you can see the surface is not smooth. It has like little. It almost looks like when they, if they poured this molten plastic into a mold or injected it, that it was kind of cooled too quickly. Yeah, it just has like some cold seams, and they were all like that. Every single one of those little spheres was like that. And I was hoping that putting the red clear over it would kind of help fill that in a little bit, and I guess it did a little bit, but they're still visible as you can see with this test piece here. It wasn't something I was going to really worry too much about. I wish they weren't there, but it's honestly not that noticeable. I've actually put those, the ones that I painted the back silver, I've already painted the surfaces red, and I've actually already installed them into the halves of the pod. And so you can see it there, and I think the effect looks just awesome. I love that. Like that the silver just looks so much more interesting, you know, it's reflecting the light in a more interesting way. If I put this next to it to compare, like it looks flat and boring. It's a lot harder to see. So yeah, I think this has ended up looking so much better. I'm really pleased with that result. There's one there, and then the one here as well. And so yeah, you can see there's some see one of those little cold seams on there, but I'm just not going to worry about it. So yeah, I've got those glued on. And with that, this video is getting a bit long, so I'm going to wrap it up. In the next video, I'll show you my painting plans. I've decided on a color scheme and chosen the mix that I like for painting different areas of the model. I experimented with some interesting paint color effects that I'm excited to show you. So stay tuned for the next video. That'll be it for this one. Thanks everybody for watching. I'll catch you next time.